Okay, peeps. Let me have your attention so we can discuss a couple things while our virtual kids are also listening and whomever else is not here. Please make sure you do know that. I almost always record all of our lectures. If you ever need them, I don't always put them on our homepage just because I haven't had everybody out, but I mean, I haven't had that many people out until this last 2 months, so they are on there. But if you ever want them, I can always share them with you. So the 2 Wednesdays that you guys will be here taking the PSAT, Dr. Jenkins suggested to us that we not give assignments that are due at specific times. You guys know that I don't do that anyway. I don't know which of your teachers are those teachers that have you complete things by 4 o'clock or whatever. I always usually put that on there. Like if we have a quiz or something, I put 4 o'clock just so that it pops up there early for you to see it. I don't ever penalize you for taking it after the fact. Sometimes I don't even penalize you when you forget to take it and take it the next day, even though I probably should. But what we have been told is not to do that. So you obviously know for this class, you probably will have a quiz. That quiz will take you the normal 10 minutes. And again, you'll have it until 11:59. I don't know, again, what your other teachers will do. That was our directive, not to give a lot of homework, not to make things due by 3 o'clock. And so, again, I don't know which of your junior teachers do that, but it shouldn't be an impact. One last thing about ISTEP, again, is that test is something that is important both for our school and for you. And I hope always, anytime you guys are tested, that you always do your best. There's always something that is tied to those tests, our school, letter grade, all those things. And that should be important to you as well. I know it doesn't appear sometimes that makes any difference, but it does. It makes a difference on our the way that our school is perceived by others. And those others would be people that admit you into college. So please make sure you are doing that your best on those tests. All right. Back into page 10, and we are not going to have our SAQ because I need every moment of the day because we lost all day Friday. I lost the 10 minutes that we would have done the SAQ. So that will be online on Wednesday. So Wednesday, you'll have a short lecture, a regular quiz, and then the SAQ. I don't know if any of you have yet taken an SAQ. Have we done an SAQ on? Okay, so we all know what we've got to do with that. All right. So at the bottom of page 10, we talked about the demise of King Cotton. On the top of page 11 is probably, again, one of the few things that Lincoln gets dinged for bad marks during his presidency. And one of the issues is what is important. And one of the things that is important in studying history is context. And the context of which Lincoln reduces the civil liberties is such that almost the entire capital of the United States of America is in rebellious territory. And so extending or removing the civil liberties of certain groups of people in an effort to win a war is something that we're generally usually okay with, as long as there's a point of which it returns. And so Lincoln's going to do that in the context, and again, that context is important, of the protection of both the Union, the protection of the strategy of the Civil War, and the protection of the people, both working behind the scenes, and that would be spies, and the Union Army. So as a wartime president, Lincoln bent the Constitution and suspended certain liberties. And that happens, again, quite often. We'll see the same thing happen in World War I. We'll see the same thing happen in World War II, where things are censored. Press is asked not to report on troop movements, those types of things. Again, the motive is saving the Union, required circumventing some areas of the Constitution. And again, these constitutional things are things that are necessary, or that Lincoln saw that was necessary. Congress will generally accept or approve these acts. Suspension of liberty is not total or more than any other time period in U.S. history when we've had this. It just is, again, one of the few things that people that don't like Lincoln can use as a black check mark against him. Again, the blockade is not something that was approved in Congress. Congress, again, will approve that much later. Increase the size of the federal army without congressional approval. Congress controls the purse strings. They control all parts of the budget of the United States of America. The president can say they have a budget. The president can write a budget, but the president has no money. Has zero money. The president can pick up the phone and say, hey, I want the 7th Fleet to move into the China Sea. Unless Congress provides the money for them to do that, it isn't going to happen. It's one of the most important checks and balances that we have in our Constitution. There is not one part of our 3-part government that controls the military, and that's essential. So Lincoln increased the size of it without asking. Now, the important part is when Congress goes back into session, Congress approves it. So they back retro approve that increased size of the federal army. He also, again, extends the volunteer enlistment to 3 years without congressional approval, but eventually they will do that. Directed his Secretary of Treasury to advance $2 million to 3 private citizens for military purposes, again, without congressional approval, but Congress essentially will do that. Again, this is where you want to remember that Congress is made up of all Northerners. There isn't anyone there that doesn't side with Lincoln. So there's not really a lot of debate on these issues at this point. Eventually there will be from the state of New York. New York is going to be our first state that's going to push back on a lot of Lincoln's going around Congress's statements. The one on page 11 that's the most important is F, suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus translates into show me the body. That's what that means. Corpus, that's a corpse. So it means show me the body. And essentially what habeas corpus means is you got to tell me why I'm in jail. It is, again, a fundamental constitutional right that we cannot put you in jail without telling you why. Every state has a time period of what you must say. I think Indiana is 72 hours. So you can be arrested in Indiana. They can hold you for 72 hours, but then they either have to press charges or release you. It's why the wheels of justice appear to move really slow, because really they have one shot to get you on this. If you're being investigated for murder and they hold you for the 72 hours and they don't charge you, as soon as you get out, you are cleaning up everything you possibly can, right? So that you're not charged for that crime if you did it, right? So that's why they have to be really careful. They have one time and one shot to get this. When Lincoln suspends the habeas corpus, he does it for the reason of spies and anti-unionists and sabotagers, those people that we know are doing things to subvert the union cause, but we can't prove it. And why can't we prove it? Because they're really good spies. And in that aspect, habeas corpus needs to be removed. So Chief Justice Taney ruled that habeas corpus could only be set aside by Congress. We had 864 people held without trial during these first 9 months. Lincoln ignores it. He does a Andrew Jackson and says, I'm just going to pretend that I don't see that. And again, this gives us a precedent. We haven't talked really about presidents setting precedents since Washington. And a precedent means a president does something, or anybody does something for the first time, and that's the way it goes. That happened a lot to me when I first came to teach here when I thought things were really strange and weird, and everybody just says, well, that's the way we've always done it. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense that that's the way that you always do it, because that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me that seniors pick the junior senior class prom when juniors are the ones that put on the prom. That doesn't make any sense to me. Every place else in the whole free world, that's part of the excitement. Like the juniors pick the theme and they keep it a secret, and the seniors all walk in and they're like, oh, this is awesome. Everybody does that except here. And I ask why. Well, that's just the way everyone does it. Okay, that's a precedent. When people just say, don't know why, that's just why we've always done it. And so Lincoln does this as well. During crisis of wartime, the president can bend the law for the welfare of the country, including suspending the court's authority. We've now even pushed that a little bit further, that we don't necessarily have to have war. After 9/11, when we were attacked, the federal government suspended the constitutional protection of not having your phone wiretapped. So if the government wants to listen to your phone calls, they have to go through a procedure. They have to get a warrant. They have to provide reasons why. After 9/11, we're like, all of this was planned on phones. We need to be able to listen to anybody that we think might be part of this. And because of 9/11, because we were so shocked and afraid that this could happen again, we said, sure, listen to our phone calls. And all of us righteous people said, I have no reason for you not to listen to my phone calls. Listen to my phone calls. So they passed the Patriot Act. They gave it a really awesome name that you can't go against it, called the Patriot Act. And so for 10 years, the federal government can listen to anybody's phone calls that they wanted to. They got lots of people swept up in lots of things that had nothing to do with terrorism because of the Patriot Act. That's also really important to know for those of you planning anything on the phone. They can only get you for what the warrant wants, right? So if they're looking for drug traffickers and they listen to the phone and they hear that you are going to rob a bank, they can't prosecute you on the robbing a bank thing. That's the way that works. But the Patriot Act just opened the door. We have now reversed that. Took about 10 years to reel that back in. But that's what people in a country who feel they need to be protected are willing to do. And that, again, is what happened during the Civil War. Finally, in 1863, Congress is going to approve Lincoln's action, and then arrests will increase spies, smugglers, blockade runners, foreigners, anyone that appears to be working against the Union. Arrange for the Union Army to oversee voting in the border states. Again, that'll be especially important in keeping those border states as part of the Union. Federal officials also suspended certain newspapers and arrested their editors for obstructing the war cause. Again, that is a direct violation of the First Amendment, but that will happen time and time again as far as censorship is concerned of newspapers when it's in the best interest of both troops and the movements of troops and any kind of war effort. Signed a bill outlawing slavery in all national territories, even though it conflicted with Dred Scott. And generally, civil liberties and constitutional rights were respected during the war and then especially afterwards. And this, again, will be important. So as we end the politics, make sure that you have especially those really important administrative and legislative things that happen, the railway, homestead, Morrill, tariff, the Banking Act, and the land grant. And make sure that you understand why each one of those is important. And then what we're really looking forward to is what happens after the Civil War. When the Civil War is over, we move into this Gilded Age where the United States of America becomes the economic superpower. So the United States has been in this little isolated bubble. They haven't really affected or impacted anything in the world except what's happening here. The very first time the United States steps out into the world on the global stage, it is as an economic superpower. And I don't mean a small economic superpower. I mean a giant size economic superpower. We become the producers of the world. We create this wealth in the United States of America that has never been matched, not even close. Not even close. If we look at the top 5 wealthiest Americans, it is people from this time period. Rockefeller, Morgan, Vanderbilt. They beat Gates. They beat Bill Gates. They beat Warren Buffett by miles. Rockefeller is still the top. That guy earned more money in the Gilded Age and top that beats anybody when adjusted for inflation by millions. And how does he do it? With railroads and a whole lot of meanness and help from the federal government. But that's what we're headed to. So how does what happened in the Civil War that is going to lead us into this Gilded Age that we're getting ready to begin? All right, so now we're ready to move into the actual war itself. We're not obviously going to spend a lot of time with this because, again, there are very little questions asked about the actual war. We need to know a couple of things. We need to know Fort Sumter, why Fort Sumter was important, what Fort Sumter does, the strategy that Lincoln employed to make it a war that the South attacked the North and that the North was just minding its own business. And again, I put at the top, military history not emphasized on the AP exam. Although the impact of major battles, the issue of the grand strategy will show up occasionally. Military history doesn't even show up on long essays. So the strategy is very simple of the Union, and it is to outlast and strangle the South through attrition. And attrition means we're just going to wear you down. We're just going to wear you down until you give up. That's attrition. And the North has the advantage in a battle of attrition because of population, because of resources, and because of wealth. And that will be the problem is in that war of attrition is at some point will the North begin getting tired of fighting. That's what Copperheads and that's what the people in New York are hoping for, that at some point people get tired of this war, even though the North is going to win and set up some kind of peace treaty. That's the fear. So the first part is strangling the South by a blockade of its coast. That's the Anaconda Plan. The Anaconda Plan is a blockade on the Atlantic around the state of Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico, and then even up the Mississippi River. And then once we go up the Mississippi River at Vicksburg, when that siege is over, just squeeze and squeeze everything. And so nothing is getting in the South, nothing is getting out of the South. Control the Mississippi River, devastate the South by cutting a swath through Georgia and sending troops north through the Carolinas. That will come at the end. That will be General Lee's march to the sea, in which he just burns and ravages everything. And then capture Richmond by alienating the remaining Confederate armies. Again, please note that the United States government has to fight all of these armies. They have to fight the Army of Northern Virginia. They have to fight the Army of Mississippi. They have to fight the Army of North Carolina. There is not one Confederate army. General Lee is in charge of all of those. He's the head guy, but they all are fighting their own battles. There'll be battles in North Carolina after April 1865 until General Johnson will surrender his Army of North Carolina in Raleigh. So even though we say Appomattox is the end of the Civil War, it's really not. There is fighting that goes on after April of 1865. So our first real battle after Fort Sumter is the Battle of Bull Run. So the other thing that makes studying the Civil War really interesting is that the North named it one thing, the South named it another thing. The North calls it the Battle of Bull Run, South calls it the Battle of Manassas. One names it for rivers close by, one names it for towns close by. Obviously, since the North won, we go by the Battle of Bull Run. In certain textbooks, still in certain places, you will see that Manassas pop up every now and then. This is really, really close to Washington, D.C., 30 miles. 30 miles is really, really close now, but to have a battle 30 miles is really close. This is a first land battle. This is the really first engagement, right? Fort Sumter was really just an arterial cannon ship to shore kind of fight. This is really hand-to-hand combat. People decided, hey, let's go watch. Let's go watch a war. Let's take our picnic baskets and our carriages and spread out our blankets and let's watch this war. Honestly, seriously, people went out to watch this as a Sunday afternoon. I don't think it's on a Sunday, but as an afternoon diversion. Summer of 1861, and everyone thinks they're going to win fast. That is the other really essential part of both the thought process of the North and the South, is this is going to be over fast. This is going to be over really fast. And obviously that did not happen. During the battle, Union forces are near a victory. This is always going to happen. And this is Lincoln's most difficult thing to overcome. Union at every turn is just one step, one massive order from a aggressive officer away from a victory. And they don't do it. They don't do it for many reasons: loss of life, fear of not having reinforcements. Their reconnaissance was ineffective and overestimated the size of the Confederate Army. The Union Army played it safe. The Confederate Army did not. And Union forces near reinforcements from Shenandoah Valley, led by Stonewall Jackson, surprised the Union troops. And by mid-afternoon, they are in a full-on retreat. So the difference between a retreat and a full-on retreat is very simple. If we're retreating, we're doing it in stages, right? So if I am fighting you guys, and this is our battle line, and I see I'm overwhelmed, and I start blowing the call for retreat, we do it in stages. We fall back in stages. So the first group will fall back, everybody will regroup, and then we'll fall back. We do it slow, methodical, so that we get everybody, we get all of our supplies, we don't turn anything over to the enemy, we make sure we've got all of our secret papers, that we've got all of our weapons, that we get all of our food, that we get all our people, and we start this slow retreat. A full-on retreat means everybody turn and run. You don't ever want to be in a full retreat, because you don't have anything protecting you. I forgot the most important part. That's the reason for the stages, right? So while you're pulling back, we have a line that's firing that way. Does that make sense? So that when you turn your back to the army, when you turn your back to the enemy, we still have people firing and protecting you. Then we fall back to that line. Everybody's going to fall back to this line. Then we all fall back to this line. Then we're going to go back with people still firing. So you have a protected retreat, even though your back is turned. Full on retreat, everybody's running for their lives. Everybody's running for their lives. It is a full on retreat with zero skill, strategy. Everybody's there for themselves. This now is going to also include people in carriages and picnic baskets that are on this full-on retreat as well. Casualties. The Union is going to lose 2,800 men. The Confederates are going to lose 1,900 men. But the Battle of Bull Run is most important for A6, the psychological impact. The North now realizes this is it. This is not what we thought it was going to be. This is a long, bloody war. The South, on the other hand, grows complacent. We lick those Yankees. God, that was easy. Easy. Southern enlistments fall off. Preparations for a long war relaxed. So two things happens. The South kind of goes, whew, that was easy. They just ran. Chicken liver, belly, yellow sapsuckers just ran. They're cowards. The North said, oh, wow, this is going to be a whole lot harder than we thought. So the first guy we have, and here's the wonderful thing about the beginning of the Civil War for the Union, is that you do not have to know any of these generals' names. Why? Because there are going to be so many of them. The only ones you'll need to know are the ones that come in at the end: Robert E. Lee and General Grant. The rest of them just rotate in a revolving door. And Lincoln, this is the bane of his existence that he cannot find a competent general. Why? Because almost all of them were Southern, and that is why their strategy is so important in the South, because they don't have enough men, but their generals are able to prepare a strategy that allows them to win for 3 years. 3 years they're going to win at a cost that is perilous to the Union. So McClellan is the first in the Army of the Potomac. He gives McClellan the command in late 1861. His flaw is he is overly cautious. He believes he's always outnumbered. He could have at many times pressed and won. The positive of McClellan is his men love him. They absolutely love him. They probably love him because he's overly cautious, because he's not out to risk their lives. And he, again, will be one of the very few generals that the Union Army loves. The Anaconda plan is, in the beginning, ineffective. They've got a lot of coastline. We don't have a navy. So we have to develop this navy. Again, it will take some time to do that. England, Britain respects that blockade. We are going to have a battle of the ironclads. And what that simply means is it's an old wooden ship that has been refitted with railroad ties along the sides to give it some support. And we'll just have the one battle between the Merrimack and the Monitor. It doesn't amount to much, but likes to throw it in there. So we have the war in the Eastern Theater, and this again is the peninsula of Maryland, and that McClellan is abandoning again up the James and New York rivers. So those of you that have a mental map, this is what is called the Delaware, Virginia, Maryland, that little jet thing that comes out into the Atlantic. This is when, on the 7 Days Battle, Robert E. Lee takes command of the Confederate Army and his first victory. And McClellan is going to win. But take a look again at the losses. This is important, right? The Confederate Army wins, but has more losses. That's the different strategy between the Confederate, throw everything at them, and the Union Army's like, oh, let's be cautious. Eventually, this catches up. It takes 3 years for it to catch up, but it's going to catch up. Typically, when we look at battles and wins and losses, the people that lose the most men are not the winners. But this will be the way this will fight out over time. We fight the Second Battle of Bull Run. Again, Union casualties are high. And then we get to the most important battle. If we had not lost all day on Friday, we would be watching this movie today, but we are not, is Antietam. So on the top of page 3, there needs to be a big giant box around Antietam. As we study wars, because we still have a whole lot of wars left in this class, we have Spanish-American, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam to get through. And in all of those battles and all of those wars, 4 things are important. What started, a strategy, a turning point, and the end. So we are getting ready to talk about the turning point. And it's not Gettysburg. Gettysburg is not the turning point. Gettysburg is just important because of that address. Antietam is the turning point. And here's how you know stuff is important, is when the United States Navy names battles or ships after battles that take place on land. That's how much you know there is a USS Antietam. The Navy doesn't very often name especially their fast frigates, their really important ships after land battles. This is an important battle. So what happens is 2 things. Lee is going to invade again. Lee is invading Maryland again to try to take it away. Maryland's a border state. Union Army has to hold this. Antietam is fought over a series of days in especially 2 places. One is a bridge, cross this little quaint looking stone bridge. And then the other one is in what's called the sunken ground. So that there's ground that's down and there's ground that's up. The third place is a cornfield. It is September. Corn is up high. It is ready to be harvested. It is taller than the men, and we are fighting in a cornfield. Those of you that have ever run through a cornfield or played any kind of games in cornfields, I never did. I didn't grow up around cornfields, so I don't know. But they're high, and I can't imagine fighting a battle in a cornfield and not knowing who you're shooting at. Those of you that know anything about the artillery at this time period, it creates a lot of smoke. So you are in almost a blind situation, fighting for your life and trying not to die. And Antietam is, again, going to be that issue. So we've got a couple of things. September 17th, the Battle of Antietam is the bloodiest day of the war. The casualties, again, at this day are immense. It is brutal. Casualties, 12,000 men. Confederates, 10,000 men are going to die. And it is considered, please look at number 3, one of the most decisive battles in world history, not just U.S. history. Historians love making lists, and this is one of the favorite lists to make, most important hit battles in the history of the world. One of them is the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and another one in the top 10 is the Battle of Antietam, fought in the United States of America, because what it does is this is what changes the tide, very much like Saratoga, when the French said, okay, now we're going to help you because we think you can win. The same thing happens in Antietam. South, never again so near victory. This is the apex of the South, and they're going to go down after this. The North is going to take this as a victory, and the reason the Battle of Antietam is so important is that after the Battle of Antietam, Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. This is what Lincoln needed to move the war from about preserving the Union to abolishing slavery. This is the battle. This is the significance of Antietam. That is why Antietam is important to the world and not just U.S. history, because of the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation. So really quickly, I know we're almost done, but I do want to finish this. So the Emancipation Proclamation comes after a victory, even though it's not a victory. It's still kind of a stalemate. In 1862, Congress had passed the Confiscation Act. Union Army could confiscate slaves, but the Emancipation Proclamation comes on January 1st, 1863. And now we have this war as a higher moral cause. Lincoln's immediate goal, not so much to free slaves as to strengthen the moral cause. All slaves in areas of rebellion declared now and forever free. Slaves in the border states not included. Doesn't really change much, except to get that information down to those slaves down in the South. All right.